An astrophysicist decodes a signal from deep space. It's not a greeting, it's a work order for a machine coming to remake our world. But the most terrifying discovery isn't what the signal says. It's that our own governments already know about it. They've seen the countdown, and their plan is to do nothing but quietly manage our extinction. What do you do when the scientific truth is the one thing that can't be told? The silence of the Atacama Desert is a profound thing. At 16,000 feet, under a sky so clear it feels like a tear in the fabric of reality, the only sounds are the ones you bring with you. For Dr. Arina Petrova, the only sound that mattered was the whisper-quiet hum of the supercooled servers, processing the secrets of the cosmos. Inside the main control room of the Paranal Observatory, the world was reduced to the cool, sterile glow of 24 monitors. Each screen was a window onto a different slice of the universe. But Arina's eyes were fixed on just one. For the past 73 hours, she had been locked in a vigil, tracking a ghost. Its official designation was FRB 2025-0828. A fast radio burst, a cataclysmic blast of energy from billions of light years away, lasting less than a millisecond, yet containing more power than our sun releases in a day. Astronomers loved the bursts. They were the universe's fireworks, but Arina wasn't watching the fireworks. She was listening to the silence that came after. The door hissed open, and the comfortable scent of roasted coffee beans momentarily broke her concentration. Dr. Ben Carter, his graying hair a testament to 30 years of looking up, ambled in holding 2 ceramic mugs. He was the observatory's director, a man whose pragmatism was as vast as the desert outside. He set one of the mugs on the console next to her, his gaze drifting to the chaotic waterfall of spectrographic data on her screen. "Still listening to the universe's static, Arina?" he asked, his voice a warm, gentle rumble. "I thought the point of these things was the half-second burst, not the hours of nothing in between." Arina didn't look away. Her fingers traced the jagged, unpredictable line of the waveform. "The nothing isn't nothing, Ben," she said, her voice low, intense. "It's the space between the notes. It's the context. The burst is a scream, but the noise between the bursts, it's the breath." She'd been tracking FRB 2025-0828 for months. Unlike most FRBs, this one was a repeater. It flashed with a clockwork precision that was almost unnatural. Every 78 hours, 22 minutes, and 12 seconds. And the noise between each pulse was a sea of data so vast, so chaotic, that everyone else dismissed it as interstellar interference. But to Arina, it felt different. It felt heavy. Ben took a slow sip from his mug. "Context is one thing. Obsession is another," he said, his tone kind but firm. "You're chasing patterns in white noise. It's a dead end. Don't chase ghosts in the machine, Arina. There are 1,000 other real mysteries to solve." He gave her shoulder a light pat and left the room, leaving his coffee and his warning hanging in the air. Arina watched him go, then turned back to the screen. Ghosts in the machine. Maybe he was right, but she had to be sure. Hours later, the control room was a tomb. The main lights were off, the desert night outside a wall of impenetrable black. The only illumination came from the single, cyan-hued monitor Arina was hunched over. Ben's coffee sat untouched, cold and bitter beside her keyboard. Her vigil was over. Now the test began. For the last 6 months, in the quiet moments between her official duties, Arina had been writing a piece of code. A denoising algorithm, but one unlike any other. Standard filters were designed to find a needle in a haystack, to isolate a clean signal from the background noise. Arina's algorithm was designed to analyze the haystack itself, piece by piece, straw by straw, on the assumption that the haystack wasn't a random pile at all, but an intricately constructed sculpture. Her fingers trembled slightly as she typed the final command and hit Enter. A small window popped up on the screen. Executing. Estimated time to completion, 4 hours. She leaned back in her chair, the leather creaking in the silence. 4 hours to filter petabytes of raw data captured from the space between the pulses of FRB 2025-0828. 4 hours to either prove she was a genius or confirm she was a fool chasing ghosts. She closed her eyes, listening only to the hum of the servers. Each cycle, a tick of the longest clock in the world. She must have drifted off. A chime, soft but insistent, pulled her from a dream of static and falling numbers. Her eyes snapped open. On the screen, the progress bar was gone. In its place was a single stark white window with 2 words: process complete. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She took a breath, held it, and clicked the window away. Underneath it was the result, her creation, her filtered data, and it was beautiful. The chaos was gone. The jagged, unpredictable waveform of interstellar noise had been completely stripped away. In its place was a signal, a clean, impossibly perfect signal. It wasn't a single sine wave tone. It was a structured, repeating pattern of discrete mathematical pulses, arranged with a precision that no natural phenomenon could ever produce. It was geometric. It was intricate. It was deliberate. Her breath caught in her throat. Her mind, trained to see the elegant chaos of the cosmos, the beautiful, messy math of novas and nebulas, could not process what she was seeing. This wasn't physics. This was language. She pushed her chair back, a low gasp escaping her lips. Her eyes, wide with a terrifying, ecstatic awe, reflected the glowing cyan data. The signal was not random. It had never been random. The ghost in the machine was real. The next morning, sunlight streamed into Ben's office, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. The room was a comfortable academic clutter of books and star charts. Arina stood before his desk, her laptop open, displaying the pristine, impossible signal. She hadn't slept. She couldn't. Ben leaned forward, his brow furrowed as he squinted at the screen. He traced the elegant, repeating structure of the waveform with his finger. "It's a beautiful pattern, Arina. I'll give you that," he said slowly, his voice laced with a professional skepticism that felt like a physical blow. "It's also classic aliasing. Your algorithm is seeing a face in the clouds. It's so aggressive at filtering noise that it has started creating its own patterns out of the remnants. It's imposing order where there is none." Arina's jaw tightened. "It's not aliasing," she said, her voice strained. "Ben, I've triple-checked the code. I've run simulations for weeks. The math is sound. This is in the data. It's real." Ben leaned back in his chair, his expression softening from academic critique to genuine concern. He looked at her tired, manic eyes, the dark circles underneath. "Prove it," he said, his voice gentle, but his words like granite. "I want you to run a full hardware diagnostic. Every circuit, every receiver, then recalibrate the entire array, dish by dish. I want you to eliminate every single possibility that this pattern is our own equipment echoing back at us. If that pattern is still there after all of that, after you've scientifically, methodically, proven that it cannot be us, then maybe you have something." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "But until then, Arina, this is an artifact, a ghost, and I can't let you ruin your career over it." Ben's challenge echoed in the sterile, refrigerated air of the server room. "Prove it." It was the fundamental creed of science, the wall that separated discovery from delusion. And so, Arina Petrova, who had just made the single greatest discovery in human history, found herself on her hands and knees, checking fiber optic connections in a sub-basement 5,000 meters above sea level. For 3 days, she lived in the belly of the beast, surrounded by the quiet thunder of the observatory's central nervous system. She ran diagnostics on every component, a process so tedious it felt like a punishment. She checked the parametric amplifiers for signal bleed, tested the cryocoolers for micro-vibrations, and ran phase noise analysis on the master clock. She spoke a language of error margins and signal-to-noise ratios, muttering technical jargon to the unblinking green lights of the server racks. It was a methodical, frustrating, and lonely crusade to prove that she wasn't crazy. With every pass that flashed on her diagnostic tablet, a knot in her stomach tightened. Part of her, the small, frightened part that listened to Ben, had hoped to find an error. A simple hardware fault would explain everything. It would be disappointing, but it would be sane. It would be an answer she could live with. But there were no errors. The diagnostics all came back green. No phantom signals, no crosstalk, no systemic ghosts. The machine was perfect. On the fourth day, exhausted and grimy, she returned to the silent sanctum of the control room. Her hands felt heavy as she called up her algorithm. She fed it the raw data from the night before. She didn't let herself hope. She simply watched, a hollow feeling in her chest. The program executed, the filter engaged, and the screen resolved. The signal appeared. Instantly. Exactly as before. A pristine, intricate mathematical heartbeat in the void. It wasn't a ghost in her machine. It wasn't a ghost in the observatory's machine. It was out there, billions of light years away, pulsing in the dark. And it was real. The confirmation didn't bring elation. It brought a profound and terrifying weight. The burden of proof had been met, but the burden of understanding had just begun. Days bled into weeks. Arina moved out of the control room and into her office, transforming the small, tidy space into a chaotic map of her obsession. The signal became her entire world. She printed its patterns on huge sheets of paper, plastering them over the walls until the room looked like the cave of some prehistoric mathematician. The windows were blacked out. Sleep became a nuisance, food an afterthought. She survived on lukewarm coffee and nutrient paste, her physical world shrinking as the intellectual one expanded to cosmic proportions. She was no longer just an astronomer, she was a cryptographer, attempting to decipher a language with no shared context, a logic with no common ground. She treated the universe's fundamental constants as a potential primer. Were the pulses spaced according to the value of pi? Did the patterns encode prime numbers? She spent days trying to map the signal's structure against the spectral lines of common elements, against the unyielding tick of Planck time. Every theory was a rabbit hole. Every failed attempt was a closed door in a maze with a million wrong turns. She wasn't just analyzing data anymore. She was trying to think in a mind that was not, and had never been, human. She was isolating herself from her own species in an attempt to understand another. The breakthrough, when it came, wasn't a thunderclap. It was a whisper. It was 3 a.m, the observatory silent around her. Her eyes burned from staring at the screen. She was tracing a small, deceptively simple sequence of pulses that repeated throughout the signal. It seemed too basic, too rudimentary to be important. And then, a thought, born of sheer exhaustion, struck her. What if it wasn't a number? What if it was a picture? On a hunch, she fed the sequence into a 3D modeling program, assigning each pulse a spatial coordinate instead of a numerical value. The software rendered the points, and there it was. Staring back at her from the screen was a perfect schematic representation of a neutral hydrogen atom, a single proton, orbited by a single electron. The simplest, most abundant thing in the entire universe. It was the hello world of the cosmos, the universal key. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice hoarse. A frantic energy seized her. Using the hydrogen atom as a Rosetta Stone, a cipher to unlock the signal's syntax, she fed it back into her decryption algorithm. The alien mathematics, once impenetrable, began to yield. The abstract pulses began to resolve into recognizable forms of information. On her screen, a torrent of data began to flow, but it wasn't a message of peace. It wasn't a greeting. It was technical data. Complex chemical formulas scrolled past, describing compounds that defied earthly chemistry. Architectural schematics for vast, impossibly complex devices rendered themselves in wireframe. And most disturbing of all, there were intricate biological diagrams, protein folding sequences, not for carbon-based life, but for a bizarre, silicon-based biology. This wasn't a conversation. It was a database, an encyclopedia, a technical manual. She was still staring, mesmerized and horrified, when the morning sun finally broke over the Andes. The door to her office opened, and Ben Carter stepped inside, a mug of coffee in his hand. "I was getting worried," he started to say, then stopped. He took in the scene, the paper-covered walls, the darkened windows, the manic gleam in Arina's eyes. His gaze fell on the monitor, on the complex alien schematics shifting and turning. He didn't see a breakthrough, he saw a breakdown. "Arina," he said, his voice soft with pity, "you have to stop. This is career suicide." She jumped up, pointing a trembling finger at the screen. The weeks of isolation had stripped away her composure. "Don't you see, Ben? I broke it. It's a technical manual. Look," she pointed to a complex spinning molecule. "That's a protein folding sequence, but the backbone isn't carbon, it's silicon. It's a blueprint for an entirely different kind of life." Ben just shook his head slowly, his face a mask of deep, professional sadness. "Or," he said, his voice gentle, "it's a fractal pattern, a complex but meaningless shape that your mind, your brilliant, pattern-seeking mind, is shaping into what it desperately wants to see." He took a step closer. "If you go to the review board with a story about an alien instruction manual that only you can see, based on a pattern nobody else can verify, they won't just reject your paper, they will revoke your tenure, your career. Everything you have worked for will be over." He looked her directly in the eyes. "You need irrefutable, unambiguous proof. Something more than just a pattern on a screen. Until you have that, all you have is a ghost story." His words, meant to save her, hit her like a physical blow. She looked from his pitying face to the screen full of impossible knowledge. She had discovered the secrets of the universe, only to be told they were a figment of her imagination. Ben's words were a brand on her confidence. Irrefutable, unambiguous proof. He was right. An alien blueprint for silicon-based life was anything but. It was too complex, too open to interpretation, too easy to dismiss as the fantasy of an exhausted mind. She needed something hard, something that could be measured and verified, a single, cold fact that the scientific establishment could not ignore. Shaken and running on pure adrenaline, Arina abandoned her chaotic office and descended into the chilled, humming heart of the observatory, the data archive. This wasn't a room of discovery. It was a library of the known, a cold storage of cosmic history. Surrounded by racks of servers that held petabytes of sky survey data, she began her new search. She pushed aside the complex schematics and biological data she had decrypted. Instead, she focused on a small, rigidly structured block of code that repeated within the signal at precise intervals. It was different from the rest of the data stream. It was simple, elegant, and brutally efficient. Her hypothesis was a desperate one. This wasn't part of the manual. This was the address label. It was a navigational marker, a set of coordinates written in the universal language of physics and mathematics. A star map. The task she set for herself was monumental. She was attempting to cross-reference an alien coordinate system with its unknown reference points and geometric basis against humanity's painstakingly constructed charts of the heavens. It was like trying to match a single fingerprint to every person on Earth simultaneously. She wrote new code, teaching her systems to search for stellar parallax, redshift, and pulsar timings that might correspond to the alien data points. It was a search for a single, verifiable point of light in an ocean of billions. She was no longer trying to interpret a message. She was trying to read a map drawn by a hand that had vanished before her own species was born. Hours bled into a long, desperate night. The servers hummed around her, their quiet power a stark contrast to her own dwindling energy. Every search came back with thousands of near misses, statistical ghosts that would lead to nothing. Doubt, cold and sharp, began to creep in. Ben's pitying face swam in her memory. Was he right? Was this entire thing a complex delusion she had built for herself? She was on the verge of giving up, of surrendering to the crushing weight of impossibility. She slumped in her chair, staring at the screen. One last try. There was an outlier in the alien data she couldn't account for, a slight warp in the geometry. On a wild, sleep-deprived hunch, she theorized it might be a compensation for gravitational lensing, the bending of light by massive objects over immense distances. It was a complex, almost esoteric piece of astrophysics. She spent another hour rewriting her search parameters to account for the potential distortion, a final, desperate prayer to the gods of mathematics. She hit enter. The system lagged. The search, far more complex than the previous ones, took agonizing minutes to run. And then, 2 words flashed on the screen in stark, green text. Match found. A jolt of pure adrenaline shot through her, erasing all fatigue. She lunged forward. The screen displayed a star chart, a web of constellations and deep space objects. And on it, 2 points were highlighted. The first was labeled Origin. The system pinpointed it to a small, unremarkable dwarf galaxy on the far edge of the observable universe. She pulled up the astronomical data on it. It was a ghost, a collection of dead stars that had burned out and collapsed billions of years ago, before the Earth itself had even formed from cosmic dust. The signal was an echo from a civilization so ancient it was almost mythological, an automated message traveling through the void long after its creators had turned to dust. A sense of profound, lonely awe washed over her, but then her eyes fell to the second highlighted point. It was labeled Target, and it wasn't in some distant dead galaxy. The coordinates were terrifyingly close. It was in her own cosmic backyard. She didn't run. She moved with a purpose that felt both frantic and unnaturally calm. Back in the main control room, the vast chamber felt like a cathedral waiting for a verdict. Her hands flew across the keyboard, her muscle memory taking over as her conscious mind reeled. She bypassed her own decryption software and plugged the raw target coordinates directly into the observatory's master planetarium program. "Show me," she whispered to the empty room. On the main view screen, an image of the deep cosmos ignited. Then it began to move. The starfield lurched, then accelerated, a dizzying journey backward through the data she had spent her life collecting. Nebulas of brilliant pink and purple gas streaked past. The vast, glittering arms of distant galaxies spun by like celestial Catherine wheels. The simulation zoomed through billions of light years in seconds, a god's eye view of creation. It finally settled on a familiar, swirling cluster of stars, a spiral arm of the Milky Way. Her breath hitched. The simulation continued its inexorable push forward, past the stellar nursery of Orion, past the binary star of Sirius, past the comforting marker of Alpha Centauri. It slowed as it approached a bright, unremarkable yellow star. Soul. Time seemed to stop. The simulation drifted past the orbits of Jupiter and Mars. And then it stopped. A flashing red icon, a symbol for target, pulsed rhythmically over a small blue marble, suspended in the black. The third planet, Earth. A wave of nausea and cold terror washed over her. It was the irrefutable, unambiguous proof she had been looking for, and it was a death sentence. In that instant of pure, crystallized horror, her mind made one final, devastating connection. She pulled up a window on her console, dragging one of the first schematics she had decrypted, the one Ben had dismissed as a meaningless fractal. It was a complex diagram for what she had labeled an atmospheric processor, a device designed with chilling efficiency to break down nitrogen and oxygen and recombine their base elements into a dense, choking mixture of methane and ammonia. The coordinates and the schematic clicked into place. The 2 pieces of the puzzle became one. Her blood ran cold. The signal wasn't a message. It wasn't a greeting. It wasn't even a warning. She looked at the image of her own world, marked for an incomprehensible purpose by a force older than the stars. "It's not a message," she whispered, her voice trembling in the cavernous silence of the control room. "It's a terraformer. It's a work order." The moment of understanding was a physical shock, a wave of ice water that left Arina trembling in the silent control room. Her world, the entire world, had been recontextualized into a target. For a few frantic seconds, her mind refused to function, caught in a feedback loop of pure terror. Then, her training kicked in. A problem, no matter how catastrophic, required data, a hypothesis, and a course of action. She had the data. The hypothesis was unthinkable but undeniable. The course of action was clear. She had to tell someone. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers clumsy and numb. There was a protocol for this, a deep state contact number given to senior staff at major research installations for anomalous event reporting. It was a number she had always considered a Cold War relic, a joke. Now, it was the only lifeline she could think of. She dialed. It was answered on the first ring. Not with a voice, but with a click and a dial tone. 2 hours later, 2 black sedans without license plates rolled up the long desert road to the observatory. The next few hours were a blur of quiet, efficient men in dark suits, non-disclosure agreements that read like declarations of war, and the confiscation of her laptop, her notes, her entire life's work. She wasn't arrested. She was collected. She found herself in a room with no windows, painted a sterile shade of government grey. The only furniture was a steel table and 2 chairs. The air tasted filtered and stale. Across from her sat a woman whose composure was as sharp and unyielding as the crease in her trousers. This was Director Eva Rostova. Her title was vague, her authority absolute. Arina, running on fumes of terror and caffeine, explained everything. She laid out the clockwork repetition of the FRB, the discovery of the signal in the noise, the hydrogen key, the star map, the target coordinates, the atmospheric processor. She spoke for nearly an hour, her voice cracking, her hands gesturing wildly, trying to convey the sheer world-ending scale of her discovery. Rostova listened without blinking, her hands steepled calmly on the table. When Arina was finally done, breathless and spent, Rostova didn't question the science. She didn't demand proof. She simply gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Dr. Petrova," she said, her voice calm and level, "on behalf of a consortium you are not cleared to know exists. You are to be commended. You are the first to achieve a full decryption." The words made no sense. Arina stared at her, confused. "The first? You knew?" Rostova's expression didn't change. "We have been aware of non-terrestrial structured signals for decades. We call them ultras. Yours, FRB 2025-0828, is merely the clearest, most coherent one we have ever intercepted." She folded her hands. "As of this moment, your access to the Paranal Observatory is revoked. All your data now belongs to us. You will remain here, under our supervision. You are no longer an astrophysicist, Doctor. You are a matter of global security." The next day, she was escorted to a conference room. It was like stepping into a vacuum. A long, polished table was surrounded by a dozen silent figures, military brass with constellations of medals on their chests, and tight-lipped scientists who looked more like auditors than researchers. Arina stood at a podium, her confiscated data displayed on a large screen behind her. This wasn't a collaboration, it was an inquisition. They didn't challenge her conclusion. Not once did they question the idea of an automated, galaxy-spanning terraforming system. They accepted that as a baseline reality. Their questions were about her. Could your decryption key, the hydrogen atom, be misinterpreted as another element under certain quantum states? One of the scientists asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. What is the statistical error margin on your timeline projection for the system's arrival? Another pressed, before she could even finish answering the first. A man in a general's uniform cut in, his voice like gravel. "Dr. Petrova, who have you spoken to about this, outside of Dr. Carter?" "No one," she stammered. "I came straight to the official channels." "Are you certain?" he pressed. No emails to old university colleagues, no vague posts on a private science forum. They were dissecting her process, her methodology, her personal life. They were looking for flaws, for weaknesses. They were treating her not as the scientist who had discovered the threat, but as the primary variable in containing it. She was the leak, the human element that could not be controlled. The hours of questioning wore her down, chipping away at her sense of reality until she felt like a ghost, a phantom in her own story. That night, Rostova met with her again in the grey, windowless room. The professional mask was gone, replaced by a look of profound, weary gravity. "They believe you," Rostova said quietly. "Every word. The models confirm your analysis. The threat is real." A wave of relief washed over Arina. "Then we have to warn people. We have to start preparing, fighting back." Rostova held up a hand, silencing her. "No." The word was flat. Absolute. "We cannot tell the world. The panic, the chaos, it would collapse civilization long before the system ever arrives. Riots, wars over resources, the complete breakdown of society. Humanity would tear itself apart in months. Our only strategic option is to maintain order for as long as possible." Arina stared at her, horrified. "Maintain order? What are you talking about? We have to do something." On a large monitor behind Rostova, a new piece of data was being displayed, a sequence from the alien signal that Arina hadn't had time to fully decode. But Rostova's people had. It was a phase state timeline, a series of projections, a countdown. Arina's eyes scanned the final projection, the estimated time of arrival. Her blood ran cold. It wasn't centuries. It wasn't even decades. It was years, frighteningly few of them. She looked from the countdown to Rostova's grim, resolute face. "You're not going to do anything," Arina whispered, the horrifying realization dawning. "You're just going to let it happen." Rostova's expression was devoid of malice, filled only with a cold, terrifying pragmatism. "We are going to manage the end of the world, Doctor," she corrected, "not prevent it." Rostova's final words hung in the sterile air of the room long after she had left. "We are going to manage the end of the world, not prevent it." Arina sat on the edge of the perfectly made bed in her gilded cage, the horrifying pragmatism of their plan crushing her. Humanity was to be led quietly into the slaughterhouse, sedated by ignorance. Her discovery, the most important truth ever learned, was to be buried in a concrete tomb beneath a mountain. Along with her, she looked around the room. It was comfortable, but every corner was watched. Every sound was monitored. They had left her an encrypted data tablet for approved research, a tool of condescension meant to keep her mind occupied. For days, she was a ghost, moving through the motions of a life that was already over. But beneath the despair, a cold, hard anger began to crystallize. The core principle of science wasn't just discovery, it was dissemination. It was the shared pursuit of knowledge. Rostova's plan was the ultimate perversion of that ideal, a truth hoarded by the powerful to control the powerless. She would not let humanity die in the dark. She would fight back, not with weapons, but with the very data they were trying to suppress. A memory sparked in her mind, a flicker of an image from her presentation to the silent panel. For a brief moment, she had seen their internal network topology on a monitor, and in it, she had spotted a flaw, a momentary vulnerability in an outbound data port, a relic of an older, less secure system. It was a long shot, a crack just wide enough to slip a whisper through. Her fingers began to fly across the tablet's surface. With feverish intensity, she worked, not on new research, but on an escape plan for her discovery. She began compressing her entire life's work into a single, dense data packet. The algorithm, the raw signal data, the hydrogen key, the star map with its horrifying coordinates, and the final damning proof, the countdown. The file was her ghost, her legacy, her weapon. She encrypted it, routing it through the vulnerability she had spotted, a digital needle she had to thread through a hurricane of security. Her target was the one person skeptical enough to question it, but brilliant enough to recognize the truth if he saw it with his own eyes. Her target was Ben Carter. A piercing electronic shriek ripped through the silence of her room. A red light flashed on the wall. They knew. A screen on the wall flickered to life, and Rostova's face, cold and furious, appeared. "Don't do this, Doctor," she commanded, her voice dangerously calm. "There is nowhere for that data to go that we can't reach." Arina ignored her, her eyes fixed on the tablet. She initiated the upload. A progress bar appeared, a thin blue line crawling across the screen with agonizing slowness. In the hallway outside, she heard shouting, the heavy thud of armored boots on concrete. Rostova's voice was drowned out by the rising chaos. "Breach the door!" a man yelled. The first impact shuddered through the room, a heavy thud against the reinforced steel. The progress bar was at 30%. Another slam, louder this time. The door groaned, its frame beginning to splinter. 60%. Arina's heart hammered in her chest, a frantic drumbeat against the rhythm of the battering ram. The door buckled, a jagged crack appearing near the lock. 85%. The shouting was right outside now, muffled but furious. The door exploded inward, splintered and torn from its hinges. The first armored guard burst through, weapon raised. In that single frozen moment, Arina's eyes met his, and on the tablet in her lap, the progress bar hit 100%. The screen flashed with two simple words: transmission complete. A serene calm settled over her. She had won. As the guards swarmed in, surrounding her, she looked up, her expression not of fear, but of quiet, unbreakable defiance. Thousands of miles away, in the familiar quiet of the Atacama Observatory control room, Ben Carter rubbed his tired eyes. He hadn't heard from Arina in weeks. She had vanished. Official inquiries were met with bureaucratic brick walls. He was worried, but also annoyed. He felt she had gone off the deep end, and now he was left to clean up the professional mess. An alert chimed on his computer, an encrypted message from an anonymous node. His first instinct was to delete it. Spam. But the encryption was a type he recognized. It was Arina's. With a heavy sigh, he opened it. There was a compressed data file, impossibly large, and a simple text file. He clicked on the text. The message was 5 words. "I was right. They know." And then, a command. "Check the target coordinates. Warn them." A chill went down his spine. This wasn't the rambling of a deluded colleague. This was a desperate, focused plea. His skepticism, the bedrock of his scientific mind, warred with the deep, grudging respect he had for the most brilliant astronomer he had ever known. With a sense of dread that felt like a physical weight, he downloaded the data packet. It was Arina's entire discovery. He saw the file for the star map, the coordinates. He loaded them into the planetarium software, his hands feeling like lead. He ran the program. The main view screen lit up, the starfield beginning its impossible journey. Ben watched, his face a mask of stone, as the simulation flew backward through space and time. He saw it all, just as she had. The zoom into the Milky Way, the approach toward a familiar yellow sun, and the final, sickening stop, a flashing red icon pulsing over the third planet, Earth. Ben's face drained of color. His expression, once a mirror of pitying concern, now perfectly mirrored the look of dawning horror that had been on Arina's face when she first understood. He now understood. He was the last bastion of skepticism, and the truth had just breached his walls. The world learned the truth on a Tuesday. Ben Carter, his face grim, his voice steady, stood before a wall of cameras at an emergency press conference and laid out the data. He became the reluctant prophet of an apocalypse written in mathematics. The montage of reactions was a global chaotic storm. News reports from Tokyo, London, and Cairo showed Arina's data, the countdown timer, a permanent fixture in the corner of every screen. There was panic, there was denial, there was debate, but there was also a strange, unprecedented unity. Humanity, for the first time, had a single, common enemy, an unyielding, absolute deadline. We see families holding each other, soldiers laying down their arms, scientists in every nation working together, sharing data in a frantic, hopeless, beautiful race against time. And everywhere, we see people, in cities and in fields, on ships and in mountains, looking up at the sky, their faces filled not with idle wonder but with a terrible and profound knowledge. The final shot is from the cold, silent depths of space, looking back at our solar system, a tiny, fragile island of light. And across the silence, we hear it, a faint, rhythmic pulse, the cosmic metronome of FRB 2025-0828, continuing its indifferent journey, ticking down the final moments of a world that was now, finally, listening. What a fascinating and deeply unsettling story. It starts with a classic sci-fi question: are we alone? But the answer, a definitive and terrifying no, quickly becomes the least interesting part of the dilemma. The real conflict isn't between humanity and some alien machine. It's between two fundamentally different ideas of what it means to save humanity. On one side, you have Dr. Petrova, the pure scientist. For her, truth is paramount. Knowledge, no matter how terrifying, is a right. It's the tool we need to face our destiny, whatever it may be. On the other side, you have Director Rostova, who represents a cold, brutal pragmatism. She argues that the truth is a pathogen, that releasing it would cause a panic far more destructive than the external threat. In her view, preserving society, even for a short time, is the greater good. This pushes past simple good versus evil. Rostova isn't a villain. She's a calculator. She's weighed the variables and chosen the path of least chaos. Arina, however, chooses the path of agency, believing that even a doomed humanity deserves to know its own fate. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable paradox. Can knowledge itself be the ultimate threat? It really makes you wonder, if you discovered an unavoidable, world-ending truth, would you have a moral obligation to tell everyone, even if it meant causing immediate chaos and collapse?